Top 10 video games that would make awesome movies. In the past 2 decades, gamers the world over have witnessed Ubisoft's horrifyingly pathetic attempts at adapting their most cherished video games into blockbuster movies. Ubisoft has desecrated every sacred video game franchise he has ever laid his directorial hands on. Despite making enormous losses on all his video game movies from the very beginning of his career, Ubisoft continued to make these adaptations for 2 simple yet profound reasons. The film rights to many popular video games published by major corporations were easy to purchase, since the executives behind said corporations couldn't care less about the quality of the film adaptations, and Hollywood made use of German tax shelters to profit from video game movies whose financial losses are large enough to burn a hole through the spreadsheets of any sane accountant. In his book, The Hollywood Economist, investigative journalist Edward J. Epstein explains how Hollywood made huge profits from German tax shelters up until the mid-2000s, right around the time of the German federal election, when Angela Merkel's government came into power and subsequently changed Germany's tax laws. A Hollywood studio would first sell the rights to the film to a German shell company who would buy the movie's copyright from the studio for the cost of the movie's entire production budget. The studio would then buy the film rights back from the shell company for 90% of what the German company initially bought the rights for, and make a 10% profit on the difference. One Paramount executive described this practice as money for nothing. To retain complete control of the movie's production, Hollywood would enter into production service agreements and distribution service agreements with the German corporate shells. These agreements create the illusion that the German shell companies were simply hiring Hollywood studios to produce and distribute so-called German films. To add icing to the corporate cake, Hollywood enabled the rich German investors of the German shell companies to take advantage of German tax law by writing off any of the movie's losses at the box office as 100% tax deductible. Hollywood had used this German tax loophole for some of its biggest productions. To fatten its profit margins for The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, New Line Cinema sold the movie's rights to a corporate shell called Lord's Weight Productions, Deutschland, owned by a Munich-based tax shelter fund called Hanover Leasing. An affiliate of New Line Cinema then bought back the film rights from the corporate shell and entered into contractual agreements with said German company for New Line to produce and distribute the movie. New Line made $16 million on nothing but legal paperwork for The Return of the King's production. Now back to Uwe His long reign of cinematic terror ended when the German government reformed its tax laws. He now makes straight-to-DVD action movies no one really cares about. But after the death of Uwe lavish film career, gamers had to endure Hollywood's sad, but far less tragic adaptations of equally popular video game franchises. Hilariously bad adaptations of games such as Doom and Mortal Kombat have since tainted the image of video game movies. And unfortunately, the enormous financial success of the mediocre Resident Evil movie series has all but guaranteed us plenty of trashy video game adaptations to come. But there is a glimmer of hope at the end of the cinematic horizon. Warcraft, Assassin's Creed, and surprisingly, Angry Birds have raised the cinematic bar for video game movies and brought hope to a genre that barely escaped a black hole of artistic mediocrity. With great hope for the future of video game movies, we bring to you our list of top 10 video games that would make awesome video game movies. Warning, lots of spoilers ahead. Number 10. Inside. It's unlikely that Hollywood would ever want to turn a video game as cerebral as Inside into a movie, but in the hands of an ambitious indie director, Inside would be one of the best sci-fi movies ever made. Inside's story takes place in a dystopian future in which a fascist government spends most of its resources developing new technology to better control its zombie-like citizens. The government's latest Orwellian experiment, a hive mind born out of an amalgamation of human flesh, takes an interesting turn when the hive mind decides to take control of the mind of a young boy who lives far away from the government's testing facility in a sparsely populated rural town. The boy traverses uninhabited regions of the fascist nation to get to the hive mind while the government's military search said areas for people they suspect might be under the hive mind's control. Under the hive mind's precise commands, the boy reaches the testing facilities undetected, but resists a naked, long-haired woman under the hive mind's control, who attempts to equip him with the tool for breathing underwater. The boy panics, refusing the enhancement. So, despite all its efforts, we can assume the hive mind does not have complete control over the boy's mind. Nevertheless, the hive mind manages to get the boy to free itself. The hive mind then races through the testing facilities, knocking down everything in its path until it breaks through a large glass chamber and falls down the hill of a simulated wilderness. The hive mind's quest for freedom ambiguously ends at the bottom of the hill. Inside's movie adaptation could focus on several of the game's key themes, such as the fascist leadership that brought to life the hive mind research project, and the subtle ways the hive mind tries to escape the research facility by controlling not only the village boy's mind, but the minds of the research staff as well. The movie could also highlight the fear and paranoia that drives most of the research facility's staff, some of whom believe the hive mind project is disturbingly unethical, but their fear of being imprisoned and tortured by the government keeps them going. Our director of choice for an inside movie would be Alex Garland, the phenomenal director of Ex Machina, an unnervingly clever movie about Alan Turing's famous test for human-like artificial intelligence. And our screenwriter of choice would be Max Landis, the mind behind the thought-provoking Chronicle, a sci-fi indie that shook the box office with its unconventional take on what ordinary teenagers would do with extraordinary powers. Number 9. Watch Dogs 2. Shifting the game's locale from Chicago to San Francisco after California becomes the second state to adopt Bloom Corporation's CTO, a statewide central operating system, the story of Watch Dogs 2 follows the exploits of DedSec, a team of hacktivists hell-bent on sabotaging Bloom's efforts to expand CTO's reach. Inspired by the actions of T-Bone and Aiden Pierce, the hacktivists of the original game, DedSec, pursues the same goals of its icons, revealing government corruption and the dangers of unlimited corporate surveillance. After completing DedSec's initiation ritual by breaking into Bloom Corporation's server room and deleting his CTO profile on the upgraded CTO 2.0 software, Marcus soon becomes the team's de facto leader. Motivated by an almost irrational desire to increase their popularity on Invite, a fictional social media website that combines Facebook's and Twitter's features, DedSec decides to steal the car of a silly hacker movie they deem an insult to the intelligence of hackers and moviegoers. After successfully stealing the hacker movie's car, they stumble upon New Dawn, a new religion with questionable motives. DedSec's attempts to reveal the secrets of New Dawn is an allusion to a real-life case of anonymous hacktivism against the Church of Scientology known as Project Chanology. After exposing a secret New Dawn museum as a scam to defraud the church's believers of their money, DedSec accidentally discovers a hidden data manipulation program in the CTO software called Bellwether. Things take a turn for the worse when Dusan Nemec, the CTO of Bloom, lures DedSec's leader to Invite's office by increasing DedSec's Invite following with thousands of bot likes. Dusan confronts Marcus at Invite's office and sets up an arrest warrant against him. After Marcus officially becomes a fugitive of the state, the DedSec team decides to take a break from their hacker lives. They visit the Shelter Skelter festival where they meet Raymond T-Bone Kenny, the infamous hacker who built the original CTO software. Marcus, thereafter, invites T-Bone to DedSec's lair, Wrench's surprisingly spacious basement, where the team reluctantly accepts T-Bone as their newest member. T-Bone's daring ambitions soon become the heart of DedSec's activities. On one conspicuously early morning, Raymond shows Marcus rocket launching one of Bloom's satellites into space. Realizing the network created by Bloom's satellite will bypass undersea data cables, Marcus quickly grasps Raymond's plan to hack into one of Bloom's satellites. DedSec's new mission is briefly interrupted when Horatio, one of the members of DedSec's team, is kidnapped by Tezcas, a local gang. As the team tries to locate Horatio's whereabouts, Horatio resists Tezcas's interrogation and refuses to reveal the identities of the rest of the DedSec team. Here lies two glaring plot holes. How did the Tezcas figure out that Horatio was a member of DedSec, and why don't the Tezcas wear masks when they publicly kidnap Horatio at night? Similar plot holes plague the original game's storyline. Marcus eventually finds Horatio lying dead in a motel room's floor, having died from a stab wound. Rather than report Horatio's murder to the police and provide evidence to convict the Tezcaz gang of murder, like sane, rational people, the DedSec team mourn the death of their friend, and then they continue to relentlessly pursue their goals without any change in the makeup of their operations. We chose Watch Dogs' standalone sequel over the original Watch Dog installment because the sequel more closely resembles the real-world activities of hacktivists, even though it portrays hacktivists as closely knit social groups made up of members who all happen to live in exactly the same location. Ubisoft's financial limitations could explain the developer's decision to have each installment of the Watch Dogs series happen in a single state rather than across the globe. In real life, most hacktivists operate on an international scale and almost never meet each other in person. But if we accept Watch Dogs' basic premise that hacktivists would interact emotionally on a face-to-face level, then a director like Alfonso Cuarón, who has proven his commitment to scientific realism in the mesmerizing Gravity movie, would be a perfect fit for Watch Dogs' movie adaptation. A screenwriter with experience in the political thriller genre, like Stephen Gaghan, the creative pen behind Traffic and Syriana, could breathe life into the geopolitics of Watch Dogs' hacker world. Number 8. God of War. There are many ways Hollywood could ruin a God of War movie, and that's why it only made the number 8 spot on our list. We are still recovering from the lackluster Clash of the Titans and its abysmal sequel, but we think the right director and the right screenwriter could elevate God of War's simple story of revenge into a classic fantasy action movie. God of War is about a Spartan soldier called Kratos who decides to call upon Ares, the god of war, to save him before a barbarian soldier takes his life on a battlefield. Just before the barbarian soldier lands the final blow, Ares intervenes. Kratos pledges his allegiance to Ares on the condition that the god of war grants him the power to defeat all his enemies. Ares fulfills his request by providing him with the Blades of Chaos, a pair of swords the god fashioned for the warrior he believed was worthy enough to be his personal servant. Kratos' lust for power was, however, not enough for the god of war, and so the god decided to trick Kratos into killing his own family to relieve the power-hungry warrior of what he believed was Kratos' last remaining weakness. But Ares' plan to rid Kratos of his last shred of humanity backfires. When Kratos vows to kill the god of war and turns to Athena, Ares' arch-rival, for assistance in his quest for vengeance. And after a decade of service to Athena, the goddess of wisdom, Kratos demands to know how to kill Ares. Athena responds by asking him to complete one last task for her. She sends him to Athens to save an oracle who reveals to him the secret to defeating a god. Kratos dutifully travels to Athens and rescues the oracle, who then tells him how to find Pandora's box, a weapon that grants its bearer the power to defeat a god. To find Pandora's box, Kratos summons Kronos, the titan who was cursed by Zeus to hold the Temple of Pandora on his back as he travels across a desert for the rest of eternity. After Kratos finally finds Pandora's box, Ares kills him almost instantly.
Goodbye, Spartan. You will rot in the depths of Hades for all eternity.
But before Kratos falls into the river of Hades and potentially loses his soul to the afterlife, he is rescued by a titan called Gaia. At the end of the story, he kills Ares, but Athena and the rest of the gods say that they cannot relieve him of his recurring nightmares, and he tries to commit suicide in an attempt to end the torment of his own memories.
And Kratos cast himself from the highest mountain in all of Greece.
Hollywood's first choice for a God of War movie would likely be Ridley Scott, the director of Gladiator, but we believe Tarsem Singh, the director of The Fall, Immortals, and Mirror Mirror, is a stylistically better choice for a fantasy-themed blockbuster. Tarsem Singh could transform Kratos into a captivating anti-hero ready for the big screen. In our humble opinion, the best screenwriters for a God of War movie adaptation are Stephen S. DeKnight, the creator of the immensely popular Spartacus series, and David Franzoni, who wrote the Gladiator movie that won Ridley Scott an Oscar for Best Picture. Number 7. Hello Neighbor. Tiny Bill's smash hit stealth horror game, Hello Neighbor, would make an amazing psychological horror movie. Its premise is deceptively simple. A curious fellow closely observes his neighbor's everyday activities and wonders what his neighbor is hiding in his house. According to game theorists, the somewhat creepy neighbor is a clown who sold his soul to the devil to get the dream life he always wanted, a family and a lucrative career. But the clown neighbor's dream life is about to come to an end when the devil sends his right-hand man, Mephistopheles, to take his family away. The clown lays magic wards in the form of candles and booby traps all over the house to stop Mephistopheles from claiming his family for the devil's bargain. We believe David Fincher, a director with a ton of experience in making psychological thrillers, whose impressive resume includes The Atmospheric Zodiac and the recent shockingly entertaining Gone Girl, could immaculately realize the Hello Neighbor movie we're all dying to see. With the creative touch of Kevin Williamson, the writer behind the fascinating Scream meta movie series, we expect the Hello Neighbor movie to be horrifying, tragic, and absolutely mesmerizing. Number 6. Darkest Dungeon. Red Hook Studios' Darkest Dungeon is a Lovecraftian tale of avarice and lost honor. The story begins with a letter from an old nobleman to his younger relative, warning him of the perils of the labyrinthine dungeon that lies beneath the family's manor, and asking him to redeem the family's tarnished reputation. In order to redeem his family's reputation, the young relative hires several heroes to journey with him down into the manor's darkest dungeon. Darkest Dungeon's movie could create a complex backstory for the manor's underground museum of horrors that connects the nobleman's family history to the demons that inhabit the dungeon. For example, some demons could be the byproduct of the family's experiments in witchcraft. Famous for the magnificent designs of his movie monsters, Guillermo del Toro, our director of choice, made some of the world's most popular fantasy action movies. The Hellboy series, Blade 2, and Pan's Labyrinth. Having penned the original screenplay for 28 Days Later, the horror movie that reawakened the zombie genre's potential, Alex Garland, in our modest opinion, could add depth to Darkest Dungeon's simple but gripping story. Number 5. Hotline Miami 2. Hotline Miami's sequel dramatically expands upon the original's lore and creates a surreal, ultra-violent tale of nationalism and self-actualization gone wrong. Hotline Miami's anachronistic story switches back and forth between Jackets, the main protagonist's attempt to start a new life after fighting as a soldier in America's war against the Soviet Union in 1985, and journalist Evan Wright's attempts to uncover the reasons and meaning behind Jacket's killing sprees a year after the war ended. Before becoming a notorious serial killer, Jacket was one of the actors of a movie about a serial killer. Jacket began his slow descent to madness after witnessing the movie's star, the actor playing the movie's serial killer, get accidentally shot with real bullets by his co-star. Thereafter, Jacket falls under the influence of 50 Blessings, a neo-nationalist society that masquerades as a group of peaceful activists while giving Jacket orders via telephone calls to murder members of the Russian mafia. Nihilistic undertones pervade the remainder of the story as journalist Evan Wright attempts to learn more about 50 Blessings and its relationship with Jacket through Richter, a victim of the organization who committed murders to save his own life and that of his girlfriend. As Evan tries to buy plane tickets for Richter's girlfriend to assure her safety in exchange for everything Richter knows about 50 Blessings and Jacket, the Soviet Union launches a nuclear missile on the city of San Francisco where Evan happens to be staying as he writes Jacket's unauthorized biography. As Wright burns to ashes in the nuclear attack, death and mayhem continue to plague the city of Miami, as fans of Jacket don animal masks akin to his own and wreak havoc on the Russian mafia, until the son of the former Russian boss Jacket had murdered decides to butcher Jacket's fans in a drug-fueled rage. Even though Soderstrom and Whedon, the creators of Hotline Miami, said that they wanted David Lynch to direct the game's film adaptation, we think Nicolas Winding Refn, the director of Drive, would be a better stylistic option than the famous surrealist director. The creators drew most of their inspiration for the original Hotline Miami from Drive's atmospheric techno music and its protagonist's ultra-violent ways. Shane Black, the creative mind behind the curiously meta Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and many of Hollywood's best action movies, could make the awkward but realistic banter of Hotline Miami's ensemble cast sound even more convincing on the big screen. Number 4. Freelancer. The story of Microsoft's decade-old space trading and combat simulator, Freelancer, has stood the test of time. Set in a distant future in which humanity has spread across the Milky Way galaxy, Freelancer's story centers around the exploits of Edison Trent, a self-centered mercenary freebooter who finds himself embroiled in a war between humanity and the Nomads, a race of aliens that have the power to possess human minds. After surviving the destruction of Freeport 7 by unknown forces, Trent waits on planet Manhattan for his debtor, Lonergan, to recover from injuries he sustained from the Freeport 7 attack. He stumbles upon Junko Zane, commander of the Liberty Security Forces on planet Manhattan, hoping to get a freelancer job working for the LSF. Trent's plan to do freelance work for the Liberty Security Forces turns out well at first, but his new job ends abruptly when a thief who somehow followed him to planet Manhattan presents to him an alien artifact that he claims the attackers of Freeport 7 were desperately searching for. LSF officer interrupts their conversation and murders the thief before making an attempt on Trent's life. Luckily, Junko Zane intervenes and shoots the LSF officer. Trent then realizes that there is a conspiracy behind the alien artifact, and he asks Junko to help him find out what's going on. As Trent and Zane draw closer to the truth, the Nomad aliens manipulate LSF's forces into battling the duo and try to bury the evidence of their plans to make humanity's 4 major factions turn against each other. With enough creative control and an up-and-coming director like Duncan Jones, the indie director who rose to prominence with his clever sci-fi movies, Moon and Source Code, Freelancers could turn into a tension-filled political sci-fi thriller. A screenwriter with a knack for plot twists like Christopher McQuarrie, who wrote the popular mystery crime thriller The Usual Suspects, and the mind-bending Edge of Tomorrow, could add some needed drama to Freelancer's slow-burning narrative. Number 3. XCOM. Up until its 10th installment, all of XCOM's in-game stories were on par with the terribly silly American B-movies of the 1950s. XCOM's Declassified abandons much of the Michael Bay-esque action of its predecessors and focuses its story on an alien invasion carried out by the Ethereals, a psionic species of aliens with intentions and plans similar to that of the nomad aliens of Microsoft's Freelancer. XCOM, an international organization founded by the Council of Nations, was formed to defend Earth from the threat of alien invasions. In XCOM 2, the psionic aliens try to harvest human bodies to create avatars to replace their own degenerating bodies. To brainwash the human world into believing that their invasion was actually a peaceful exhibition, the Ethereals develop a new government system called Advent. XCOM's Advent storyline contradicts the psionic aliens' goal to terraform Earth in the game's previous installment. We hope a film adaptation could reimagine XCOM as an organization founded by the United Nations as a peaceful institution focused on researching alien technology that was eventually privatized when political turmoil and bad press from the international media forced the UN to cut its funding. A US corporation may have then bought out XCOM's facilities to sell alien technology to intelligence organizations like the CIA, MI5, and Mossad. A director with a keen eye for political intrigue like Oliver Stone could combine the hypercapitalism of XCOM's apocalypse, which includes Megaprimus, a city built upon the ruins of old Toronto and run entirely by powerful corporations, with Declassified's inner workings of XCOM and the aftermath of XCOM 2's successful alien invasion. Oliver Stone may seem like an odd choice for a sci-fi blockbuster, especially since he has never directed a sci-fi movie before, but he has established himself as the go-to director for controversial, politically themed films. From The Platoon, a haunting war film based on his own experiences as a soldier in the Vietnam War, to his most recent film, Snowden, Stone has proved himself capable of tackling the most complex political stories. Stone's adept direction, coupled with the realist touch of great screenwriters like former CIA agent Joe Weisberg, the creator of the hit Cold War spy series The Americans, and Mark Fergus and Hawk Ostby, the writing team behind the epic Expanse series, could realize an amazing XCOM film. Number 2. Starcraft. A space opera movie of Blizzard Entertainment's most iconic game would put the Star Wars franchise to shame. Starcraft's story revolves around 3 warring civilizations: the Terrans, the Protoss, and the Zerg. The Terrans are basically the humans of the Starcraft world. The Protoss are a species of technologically superior scions, and the Zerg are a hive mind species who terraform every world they encounter with their parasitic DNA. At the start of the story, the government of the human world, the United Earth Directorate, plans to colonize the far reaches of the Milky Way to avoid the threat of overpopulation on planet Earth. But the UED's plans are ruined by the malfunctioning AI of humanity's spaceships, which end up transporting human colonies to the edge of Protoss space, where they are attacked and overwhelmed by the Zerg. Fearing that the growth of the Zerg infection could spread to the rest of the galaxy, the Protoss incinerate the planets hosting both the Zerg and the human colonies. In the near future, however, a Protoss by the name of Tassador disobeys the Kalai, the leaders of the Protoss world, who brand him a heretic for disobeying their supposedly divine commands. Tassador eventually joins a rebel Protoss faction known as the Dark Templar, and as similar factions emerge in the Zerg and Terran forces, all three species are plunged into a nearly endless war for survival and control. In our humble opinion, Guillermo del Toro, the king of monster movies, is the only director capable of helming such a gargantuan production with believable state-of-the-art CGI. With the help of Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver, the writing team behind the exciting new Planet of the Apes series, and the modestly entertaining Jurassic World, Del Toro could realize the epic Starcraft movie the fans of Blizzard games have been waiting for. Before we get to the number one spot on our list, here are a few honorable mentions. Set in a dystopian future, Mirror's Edge is about a group of political rebels who must pass secret information to one another while bypassing a totalitarian government's cyber surveillance. Said rebels make use of parkour-obsessed couriers in an urban city mysteriously devoid of Uber taxis and self-driving cars. In this not-so-futuristic city, Faith Connors, a gifted courier whose parents died during the city's famous November protests, works hard to carry on her parents' activism. Despite having some obvious plot holes, if it landed in the hands of Chad Stahelski, the director of the meticulously choreographed action thriller John Wick, Mirror's Edge could still make for an intense action film. Over a decade ago, Microsoft brought its demands for film adaptation to two Hollywood studios, Universal and Fox. Having already commissioned a Halo script from scriptwriter Alex Garland, Microsoft was prepared to start negotiations with a bang. The software giant's big demands included $10 million for Halo's IP and pre-written script, 15% of the box office gross, director and cast approval, and 60 first-class plane tickets from Microsoft executives to see the movie's premiere. Microsoft was hoping Universal and Fox would compete against each other to offer Microsoft the best deal. But to Microsoft's surprise, the studios teamed up and rejected its hard-headed offer. Things went downhill from there on. Peter Jackson, Halo's producer, tried to persuade Microsoft to hire up-and-coming director Neil Blomkamp.
And then my agent was like, Peter Jackson wants you to come down and direct Halo. And I was like, yeah, I'm going. Like, I'm in, you know. and then I remember like I was in New York and I was there for a meeting about District 9, about Alive in Joburg. And, you know, I was like, I think I can make this into a film with the studio in New York. And my agent was like, yeah, Jackson saw Alive in Joburg and he says that he wants you to do Halo, so you should go and see it. And they were like, they'll tour you around Weta. And I was like, I knew instantly that there was like, I wasn't going to be able to get out of that. Like as soon as I was there, I would just love everything. That's exactly what happened. So, and then I spent 6 months making Halo, and then the rug got pulled out. So
the studios were happy with the affordable newcomer director, but Microsoft wanted Guillermo del Toro, a well-established A-list director. To convince Microsoft to hire him, Blomkamp directed his short film as part of his pitch. But despite his efforts, negotiations eventually broke down, as described in the book Generation Xbox. According to author Jamie Russell, the immensely powerful Microsoft had wandered into the deal naively, expecting everyone to play by its rules, and the resulting culture shock put immense strain on the Halo deal. Studio politics aside, Halo's latest installments has significantly improved its storyline, and at this point in time, the series has enough lore to make a compelling movie about genetically engineered super soldiers who must fight off a few alien invasions while crushing a rebellion against one of the United Nations Space Command's colonies. Amidst its wars with various alien species, the UNSC encounters the Flood, a race of parasitic aliens powerful enough to wipe out its colonies, its alien foes, and the whole of humanity. Unbeknownst to UNSC forces, an ancient and almost extinct race of highly advanced species called the Forerunners developed the Halo Array, a piece of technology powerful enough to wipe out the Flood and all life forms on the Flood's infected planets. With the help of Cortana, a benevolent human AI, a super soldier called Master Chief tries to destroy the Halo array and save the UNSC's forces. To add a little more drama to the story, Hollywood could mix elements of Master Chief's relationship with Cortana in Halo 5 to a plot built around Halo 4's storyline. Inspired by the biblical story of the Binding of Isaac, the deliriously clever game of the same name would make a fascinating psychological horror movie. The game portrays a believer's faith as a malevolent force of destruction, as a mother tries to murder her son as an offering to the Christian God, in a reenactment of the biblical story of Isaac. It might be hard to translate such anti-religious themes to the big screen when most of the game features Isaac stripped of everything his mother deems evil, including his clothes, while Isaac fends off demons literally with his tears. An indie director with an irreligious temperament like Brandon Cronenberg, the unhinged mind behind the ominously brilliant Antiviral, could bring this bizarre game to the big screen. War movies tend to portray soldiers as heroic, noble, and fearless, but Jaeger Development took a refreshingly different approach to the traditional war story for Spec Ops: The Line, the 10th title of its Spec Ops series. The Line's story begins with the arrival of America's 33rd Battalion in Dubai on their way home from active duty in Afghanistan. But a powerful and inescapable sandstorm grips Dubai, blocking all forms of telecommunication and forcing the city to shut down all its flight programs. For some inexplicable reason, riots break out in the city of Dubai as government officials evacuate the city, and Colonel Johnson Conrad, the leader of the 33rd Battalion, declares martial law to maintain some semblance of social order. Under Conrad's leadership, the battalion begins a violent crackdown on the Emirati rioters. Angered by the murder of civilians under Conrad's leadership, some members of the battalion form a faction and wage a deadly war against the remaining battalion. At this point, the battalion's continued lack of communication compels the US government to send a Delta Force team of 3 on a reconnaissance mission to Dubai to investigate what happened to the military force. Upon their arrival in Dubai, the Delta Force starts a war against the 33rd Battalion to save Emirati civilians and capture CIA agents, but they end up committing war crimes and murdering most of the civilians they intended to save. The Line's politically implausible scenario necessitates some key plot changes for the big screen. If we switch the setting from the UAE's Dubai to Bahrain's capital, Manama, and set the story during one of Bahrain's biggest social protests against its dictatorial regime, we would then have the right context for riots breaking loose and the 33rd Battalion's military intervention. Bahrain has asked UAE and Saudi Arabia to send in troops to quell its local protests in the past, and in the movie's context, the US government could send the 33rd Battalion to quell the protests and gain favor with the Bahraini government. We feel that a famous non-American director could best adapt the Line's politically incorrect story into a captivating war thriller. Danny Boyle, the British director behind heart-pounding films like 127 Hours, could adapt The Line into an exciting war drama. Screenwriter Aaron Sorkin, who penned the classic war drama A Few Good Men, could add intriguing ideas to The Line's central premise. Our number one spot goes to Fallout, the game that brought humor and depth to the post-apocalyptic genre.
Our American way of life. Isn't it grand? Peace, freedom, and bacon and eggs. Seems perfect. But what if it's not? Friends, your future may not be as secure as you think. Where will you be when the atomic bombs fall?
Fallout's story starts in the middle of the 21st century, when a global petroleum shortage brings about World War III, in which the United States wages war against China after invading Canada for its natural resources. To help America survive the imminent nuclear holocaust while reaping a handsome profit, an American corporation called Vault-Tec builds underground shelters called vaults. Almost a century later, a vault dweller leaves Vault 13 to solve his vault's water shortage. But upon his return, he is banished by the Overseer, his vault's dictatorial leader. The vault dweller murders the Overseer in retaliation and leaves Vault 13 never to return. The heroic vault dweller makes his way through the wastelands of the future and encounters a number of factions that make up the remainder of American civilization. David Cronenberg, the master of body horror, would be our first choice to direct the Fallout film. Such a film would require a writer with a deep understanding of the sci-fi genre's apocalyptic tropes like Drew Goddard, the writer and director of The Cabin in the Woods, a funny meta-movie that bends and twists the worst tropes and cliches of the horror movie genre. Shane Black, the writer behind many of Hollywood's best action comedies, like genre-busting noir flick The Nice Guys, could bring out the best of Fallout's dark humor.